Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for everybody that did that quiz yesterday, especially those of you that got it done in the time window that you needed to. Look, that's something that we were told by administration is that on quiz days we have to only give the quizzes during our allotted class time for whatever particular day that was. So appreciate you guys making sure you set your alarms and getting that done. As for this assignment today, you have your normal window of getting it done prior to like 2 p.m. Okay, but again, guys, if you happen to miss something or want to go back and make up an assignment, just contact me, reach out to me through email or whatever, and tell me that you missed something, but you were behind, you had a chance to catch up, and you went back and you did it. All right, I'll make sure I can give you some credit back. All right, so like I said, take the time to do that, and if you do so, just let me know. Give me a heads up. Secondly, just again want to just say how much I feel for you seniors and everybody, but especially the senior class for getting the news that we had yesterday, where we won't be going back and what that means. So I appreciate all your work so far, and I know that I hope that you guys are enjoying this time, this nice weather, whatever it is. But definitely thinking about you, and I had hoped that we would have got back to school sometime, for the last few weeks or whatever. But certainly it's not the case now. But I just wanted to thank you for all your efforts and stuff to this point. All right. So for today's notes, we are doing what's called the sum and difference identities. Okay. So in Google Classroom, I will attach a couple different documents. You will need this document. You'll need this. I suggest printing this out. So this is kind of like our identities that we had done weeks ago. It's just different identities now. So these are called the sum and difference. And we're going to need these in order to solve these types of problems. Okay. I went on here. There's 8 problems on this worksheet. Again, I would maybe print this out or just kind of do it in a notebook. That's up to you. But what I did and what we're going to go over now is I just picked out 3 of these problems. Okay. So out of the 8, I'm going to do 3 now. I'd hope that you would take notes as I'm going through them, whether you take notes on your notebook or on this paper here, and then finish up the other problems as your assignment for today. Okay. So again, you'll probably have to watch the video, then go in there and actually do the assignment. So on my screen, I'm going to be going back and forth between these identities and my attempt of doing the problem here. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is look at what we're given. We're given the sine of 2 angles. These angles are 3 pi over 4 and 5 pi over 6. Because we're given sine and because it's addition, we would use one of the sum identities. We're going to use the first one here, meaning we have the sine of an angle plus another angle. So I'm going to kind of expand it out, and I'm going to write it in this form. I'm going to write it as the sine of angle A times the cosine of angle B plus cosine of A times sine of B. So as I'm going to write this, I'm going to call my first one I was given here, this will be angle A, and this will be angle B. All right. So I'm going to write the sine of A, which is 3 pi over 4. So you definitely can take notes as you're watching this video, because it takes me forever to write, so you're probably ahead of me as you're writing it. But the sine of 3 pi over 4, then as you'll note, it's sine of A cosine of B, which means, all right, so sine of A times the cosine of B. And then plus cosine of A, and we said A was the first one here, 3 pi over 4. And sine of b, sine of 5 pi over 6. All right, so where did I get that from? I got that from looking at the identity sheet. Again, looking at what I'm given, and we were given sine of and the sum of two angles. So we're given this, and I expand it out using this right here. Okay, that's how you set it up. Now we have to think about our special angles, right? We're thinking about pi over 4, 6, and we're thinking, okay, root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. We got to think about the quadrants because the signs are important here as well. So I'm looking at what is the sine of 3 pi over 4, right? What is the y coordinate of 3 pi over 4? And I know that it's root 2 over 2. Now I know 3 pi over 4 is in the second quadrant, but y in the second quadrant is positive. I'm going to put this in parentheses. Cosine of 5 pi over 6. All right, well, 5 pi over 6, the x coordinate when the denominator 6 is 3 pi, is root 3 over 2. Now, 5 pi over 6 is in the second quadrant, and cosine in quadrant 2 is negative. All right, plus the x coordinate of 3 pi over 4, which is also root 2 over 2. But as we just said, 3 pi over 4, in addition to 5 pi over 6, right, these are both in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, x is negative, so this has to be a negative. Now, the y coordinate when the denominator 6 is 1/2. And the y coordinate in quadrant 2, or in quadrant 1 for that matter, is both positive, right? So positive 1/2. The trig part is now over, right? There's no more trig. Now I just have some fractions on my paper that I have to multiply or add and simplify together. So now it just becomes algebra. When we're multiplying, we multiply straight across, right? So I can multiply the numerators here, and I would get negative root 6. The denominators would become 2 times 2, which is 4. The second set of parentheses, again, multiplying straight across, is negative root 2. Multiplying the denominators gives me 4. And then my final step to this problem is going to be just simply is simplifying, right? When we have two fractions, we have to add them together. We have a common denominator here, so that'll be a little easier. But it's just root 6, it's negative root 6 minus root 2 all over 4. That's your answer. Okay. A lot of questions are going to have very similar answers. Right? There's going to be slight differences. There's going to be sign differences, but very little. All right, a lot of your answers when you're doing this are going to look just like our answer there in that first problem. All right, I'm going to skip 2 and 3. I'm going to jump to number 4, do a cosine problem. So again, once you look at the problem, notice, okay, it's cosine and it's addition, right? It's the sum. You got a plus sign right here. So that means I'm using this one this time. Cosine, it's plus, but look how that expands out. All right, even though it's addition, when I expand it out, I'm going to end up subtracting. All right, so just continually refer to the identity sheet. You'll always have this, and just make sure you're not missing anything as you kind of expand and write it all out. All right, so again, this one's going to be A, this one's going to be B, right? So I'm going to write the cosine of A, which is the cosine of 30 degrees, times the cosine of B. And then it's minus sine of A, sine of B. So minus the sine of 30 times the sine of b. So something that you might want to do is you might want to write down your special angles. You might want to write down pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 4. You might want to think of the points that they're in and also think about the corresponding angle measure, right? Like pi over 6 is 30 degrees. Pi over 4 is 45 degrees, which is 315. So something you might want to have in front of you as you're doing these problems. Okay, so the cosine of a 30-degree angle. Well, 30-degree angle is pi over 6, and the x-coordinate of those angles is root 3 over 2. Now, 30 degrees is in quadrant 1, so that's going to be positive. 315 degrees has the points of root 2 over 2. And it's the x-coordinate. All right, so 315 is in quadrant 4, but the x-coordinate in quadrant 4 is also positive. All right, moving on to the second part. So minus, now I'll worry about the sine of 30. All right, the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. It's positive. It's in quadrant 1. Now, the y-coordinate in quadrant 4 is in the bottom. If it's y, it's going to be negative. But it's root 2 over 2. And at that point, the trig, the special angles, all that stuff is now done. Now we just focus on algebra. We focus on multiplying, adding, subtracting, and finally simplifying. But again, we're multiplying these two fractions. We just multiply the numerator. We multiply the denominator. Now, this is a minus sign, right? But it's a negative times another negative. So it's actually going to end up being a positive there. It's going to be root 2 up top. And 4 again in the bottom. So the reason I said you're going to continue to get similar answers is because we're using the special angle. So we're using the same coordinates repeatedly, which is why you're going to get answers very similar, just sign differences. As I simplify this, I'm just going to put it on as one fraction. So it's root 6 plus root 2 over 4. And that's your answer. All right, the final problem I got for our notes today is number 7. Okay, so I did number 1, I did number 4. I'm going to do number 7. All right, you'll notice in all these problems, the only thing that really changes is what special angle are we using? What's the sign? So just kind of be mindful of that, be aware, take your time doing the problems. So we're going to do number 7. Now it's tangent, okay? And as you'll see on your identity sheet, tangent's a little different. We are going to do one where it is the sum, I believe, or was it a subtraction one? No, it's another sum. Okay, so we're going to use this one here. So it's tangent of A plus tangent of B over. Now this one's going to involve the most writing on my part and your part here, so just kind of bear with me. I apologize for how long it takes me and the sloppiness of my writing, but hope you can understand. So it's tangent of A, tangent of B. That's going to be my numerator. So tangent of A plus the tangent of B. You want to make sure you're following the identity sheet as you do this. all right, over. Now it's 1 minus, I'll go back to the identity sheet in a second, tangent of A, oops. All right, as I'm writing this out and as you're taking notes, sure a lot of you are watching The Last Dance right now. If you are, I hope you're realizing that how much better Michael Jordan is than LeBron James. Now, that might come to a shock to some of you guys, but he definitely is. Right? Ultimate competitor, that guy. All right. Let me go back to this. So see how it's 1 minus the product of tangent A times tangent B. So we're going to have to multiply that now. Now that I set it up, all right, now we'll actually plug in those values. So think about what is the tangent of pi over 3. So you might have to go off to the side and do some work and think about it, or you might have it memorized now because we've been doing it for months, but it's root 3. All right. Just realized I had a little typo here, right? This wasn't 7 pi over 6, it's 7 pi over 4. Tangent of 7 pi over 4. Well, 7 pi over 4 is in quadrant 4, so that means that the tangent here in Q4 is going to be a negative. And root 2 over 2 divided by root 2 over 2, anything divided by itself is just going to be 1, so root 3 minus 1 is going to be how that's going to simplify. Now let's simplify the parentheses in the denominator. It's the same thing, except here we actually have to multiply. So it's root 3 times a negative 1. All right, let's continue simplifying in that denominator. So this would be negative root 3, but a negative times a negative. All right, the next step would be for us to, as you would probably suspect here, is that we can't have that radical in the denominator. So now we have to rationalize. And we rationalize, we get it out of there by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate, which means the same thing, different sign, right? So whatever's in my denominator now, 1 plus root 3, I got to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. So I'm changing the sign. If it helps, you can put some parentheses around these, but basically what we're going to do now is just distribute, right? We're going to FOIL. We got to FOIL the numerator, we got to FOIL the denominator. We'll simplify when we see what we got left, and then we're pretty much getting our answer. But tangent definitely involves probably the most work. All right, so if I were to FOIL this, I'm going to get root 3. All right, I'm going to multiply the outside terms now, and that's going to give me a minus 3. The inside terms are going to give me a minus 1. And the last terms will give me plus root 3. So that's my numerator. Anytime you multiply conjugates, which is what we have in the denominator, you don't have to worry about the O and the I terms, the outside and the inside, because they're going to cancel out. But the first terms, 1 times 1, and the last terms would give us that. All right, as we continue to simplify in that numerator, which is going to group like terms, we have 2 root 3s. All right, negative 3 minus 1 is a negative 4. And in the denominator, negative 2. So if I were to simplify here, if I were to cross out, think about taking that negative 2 to both terms, we're going to end up getting a negative root 3 plus 2. Again, every time you do a problem like this with tangent, you're going to get something very similar to this result. Okay. So guys, I know that was a long video. I know it's tough to watch me kind of struggle here writing. Like I've been saying, I appreciate the hard work and your effort here thus far. Hope it continues. If you're ever having any issues, difficulties, shoot me an email or just a message in Classroom, whatever works. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Take these notes. Try to do the rest of the problems. Submit that later today. If anyone has any different opinions on The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, LeBron James argument, feel free to message me those too. Be good to talk about something other than pre-calc. Guys, the weather looks awesome for today. Hopefully get outside, enjoy the day. All right, take care. Talk to you soon.